the dizzy, but we can always share some ditties. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to run. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys. Miss Liz back in the house. And again, tonight's tea time is a trigger warning. We are going to be talking about grief and some other topics. So I do want to let everybody know that there is a trigger warning. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in this afternoon and joining me as we spoke about the Sterling Rose Sanctuary and her Marcy's story of her two sons and that as well. And tonight we're going to be talking with Burton Fischler, who has lost his wife through murder. So this afternoon we talked about Marcy's son being murdered, and now tonight we're going to talk about Burton's wife. So again, we have a triggering tea time out there. But before we get started, you guys all know how Miss Liz rolls. We get everybody over to Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, LinkedIn, all those good platforms. Like, follow, and subscribe, and get these tea times out there because they do make a difference, not only for my guests, but for listeners out there that may be looking for this tea time to listen to. So let's get started with disclaimer and then a beautiful intro, and we'll get Burton in here. And tonight's tea that we're teaching is teaching trauma and recovery process. That is the tea we are serving tonight in this house. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to share real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own judgment when considering any action that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my link tree, Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. Miss Liz welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time, where truth is held gently and healing is honored without rush. Today's guest carries a story shaped by unimaginable loss, profound courage, and the quiet strength it takes to keep choosing life. Joining us is Burton Fischler, psychologist, trauma survivor, counselor, and author of The Gift, Trauma to Triumph. Burton's life changed forever after enduring the brutal loss of his wife, a tragedy that could have closed his heart, but instead became the doorway to deep inner work, healing, and purpose. With a master's degree in psychology from New York University and transformative training through the Hoffman Institute in Esalen, Burton brings lived experience and professional insight together in a way that resonates deeply. His work is rooted in compassion, emotional honesty, and the belief that even in the darkest chapters, growth and meaning can still emerge. So grab your cup and settle in. Today's Tea Time invites us to sit with grief, resilience, and the possibility of transformation beyond the pain. Let's welcome Burton in and serve a strong tea together. Welcome, Burton. I lost your voice again. Let's see if it's going to kick in. Let's give it a second or two and it might kick in. We got a flashing light here. Maybe if we do la, 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 it might turn on. I'm not getting your voice again. Let me see if it kicks on. Can you hear me, Martin? You can hear me, but I can't hear you. Okay, so Burton, we're going to do like we did before. We're going to get you just to slide out and slide back in, and we're going to get you to work. For all my listeners out there, just hold on. Burton's just going to slide out, and he's going to slide back in, and we're going to share some tea together. We're just having a couple little difficult issues here with the sound, but we will get it working. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Tonight's tea time, again, is a trigger warning for anybody that has lost anybody through murder or grief, a deep grief. This is a triggering one for all of us tonight. We're just going to wait for Burton to jump back in, and then we're going to serve some tea. And again, tonight's tea is Teaching Trauma Recovery in Progress. And let's see if we can get Burton in here, and let's spill some tea together. There we go. I got you.
Can you hear me now?
I got you.
Good.
So welcome, Burton. That was a nice slide in and a slide out.
Thank you, Miss Liz.
So Burton, let's start how I start all my tea times. Who is Burton as a little guy, and who's Burton now?
As a little guy, I grew up in the suburbs. I loved nature. I came from a loving family. I loved learning and teaching. I started teaching at a fairly young age when I was in college. I also loved psychology and medicine, and I volunteered at a hospital in a detox ward, on a psych ward. I was fascinated by the contrasts of life and death, and I became familiar with the power of compassion at an early age. And I went in, I studied psychology. I departed from that in a family business, and I took a different route and then wound up in finance. And this trauma that I experienced in 2011 sort of brought me to my knees. It did bring me to my knees, not sort of. And I didn't know if I would survive. I didn't know if I wanted to survive. There was a lot of grief and anger and frustration. Sadly, in the news just this past week, what happened with Rob and Michelle Reiner, with their son stabbing them to death, mirrors what happened to my wife with her son, and both for the same reasons. That is to say that as I've learned now through a long process of attaching, feeling my feelings and analyzing what happened. Parents are often shamed into or out of a feeling of not feeling like they're enough, going into an enabling route. And both Barbara and the Reiners made that fatal mistake of letting a adult son who had mental illness and chemical addictions back into their home with fatal consequences. And
so Burton, this event that has happened with the Reiners, has it triggered your situation with your wife? And was it your son or stepson?
It was my stepson. It did trigger it. One of the questions that comes up in the work that I do now has been, because I I facilitate trauma recovery groups a couple times a week. I work with a population of people who have mental health challenges and substance abuse challenges. And it often comes up, people say to me, do I find that work triggering? And what I have found, Liz, is that when tragedy struck me, I felt like it was separating me from all of humanity. No one else was feeling or ever felt the pain that I felt. But as I moved through my pain and decided to write this book, which initially it came in two phases. First, the decision to write was purely selfish. It was because I desperately needed to heal myself. And I think when things happen that throw us for a loop, we return to practices that we're comfortable with. And as I said, I was a student. I was a graduate student. Writing was always something that I enjoyed. And I sat down and I wrote. And when I say I sat down and I wrote, for 5 years during COVID, I sat down at an outdoor table where I created a safe space by taking a patch of grass and converting it into a Zen garden. And I sat there for 8 hours a day and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. Sometimes I had to get up and walk away. And while I'm doing that, mind you, I did not know what the end of the book was going to be. Would I get to the end of the book? How would my life evolve? Because everything that I knew, I no longer knew, right? Every assumption I had made about life, my career, everything that I had worked so hard for, my values, the things that I held in great importance, these were completely brought to the ground. I wrote an article early on about the lessons from Humpty Dumpty about trauma. And I said in that all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again because he had to. He had to do it, And so I started to write, and as I wrote, it got to a point where I said, yes, I not only want to write this for myself, but I want to share it. That act of courage and kindness was a turning point for me in my healing. And I wrote the book in 4 parts. It was part 1, trauma and tragedy. And I didn't want it to be a book on poor me. So that part 1 set the stage, examined the family maladies and problems that caused all of this. Part 2 was spiritual awakenings, the practices that I discovered about the power of forgiveness, about self-love, about the value of gratitude. And then part 3 was spiritual revelations that I discovered. And when I went to Hoffman Institute early on after Barbara's death, they spoke about a quadrinity of body, mind, emotional child, and spirit. And I found myself saying, what is the spirit? What is that all about? And I had been spiritual as a young boy, but I had disconnected from that along my path, and this sort of shook me to the ground, and I became reconnected to a spiritual side in a very meaningful way. And then, so that was part 3. And then part 4 was growing and thriving. What they call in the research on trauma, post-traumatic growth, PTG. And it was nothing short of a miracle, you know, to come so far, to be able to come so far. And of course, I love, you know, I was thirsty to read everything that I could, to learn from spiritual gurus and poets and trauma researchers. Although for quite a time I had not one but 2 therapists, and I said to them, I don't have PTSD, you know. And I really, you know, now it's kind of silly that I had that, but that was I thought I was okay, and I was so far from okay. And it's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to be okay, and I came across Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he says that in any given moment, you know, we don't have a choice always with respect to the events that happen to us, but we always have a choice, even under the most horrid circumstances, of how we react to those events.
Well, Burton, I'm going to pull up your book. So the book that we are talking about, people can see it. And for all the audio listeners, kind of give them a description of what's on top of the book, Burton. So I'm going to pull it up so people can see it. How did you get the title of the book?
Well, initially I had tragedy to triumph, and I changed it to trauma. The gift evolved from an understanding. I felt that the universe, Liz, somehow, I find that we learn the most from the most difficult things in life. You know, in the work I do, I speak to patients about how until we break a leg, we don't get up in the morning and say, I'm so grateful for these legs that are carrying me out of bed. You know, we take life for granted, and we miss a lot of important things. And I realized that the gift was the awakening, first of all, to the fact that I had the ability to survive. Because as I said to you and said in the book, and I tried to write it as if I was speaking to someone, you know, sitting on the couch, relaying my experience, and just feeling that I didn't know what the future would bring. And as things opened up and evolved, and it seemed serendipitous. It was like a friend of mine said that when he lost his wife, his rabbi said everything happens for a reason. And I didn't relate to that. But he's actually the person that I'm working with on a t-shirt project, and you'll enjoy the irony here that I hadn't seen him for a decade, and he invited me to a pool party at his sister's, and he was in the pool, a very familiar image that I recalled when I used to visit him, and he had this shirt on, everything happens for a reason. So it was a split level house, and I'm standing at the side of the pool, and I feel this water trickling down on me there, and I look up, and there's a balcony, and there were a lot of kids at the party, so I figured, oh, it must have been someone with like a water balloon or something. And then I realized it was a little Yorkie puppy fiddling down on me. So with that, David, I take off my shirt. David comes out of the pool. He says, everything happens for a reason. He puts the shirt on me, and I have it to this day. So, yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, the thing is that even in the darkest times, and this is where the gift comes back, even in the most dark experiences that we have in life, if we have our eyes open with awareness and we look closely, we begin to see the whispers and the messages of how to draw from even horrible events positive outcomes and even wisdom and spiritual connection.
What I really love about your book, Burton, is that the image on top. It's like a split screen where you have the sadness on one side and then you have the joy on the other side. And we talked about that this afternoon, the hope, the grief of hope. I can see the hope on the one side and the pain on the other side. And that's exactly what you've done, is taken the pain and turned it into hope and turned it into a purpose by writing this book. And that's the gift that you're giving to everybody.
Yes. And interestingly, 1 year in the book, I have the full face of my sad face and of my happy face in the appropriate parts of the book. And the way I had that come to having the sad face in my camera was that 1 year after I lost my wife and I wasn't able to cry, I went to a Lynn McTaggart mindfulness workshop on the power of intention. And we broke into small groups, and our group was trying to help a young lady who had lost her uncle. And we were trying to set our attention on helping her. And a person sitting next to me who does spiritual work leaned over and said, "Don't be surprised if the messages that we're giving here are going to come back and help you in the not too distant future." And the next day, I found myself listening to Stevie Nicks' Landslide. And, you know, the landslide takes you down. And I burst into tears, endless tears. And why, I don't know, Liz, why did I stop to take a picture of that? I shared it with people at the time, and I said, you know, we need to, and this is a big theme of mine, we need to stop feeling shame surrounding human experiences. You know, we don't feel shame if we have diabetes. Why are we feeling shame if we are unfortunate to be traumatized or be sitting with grief or to even become addicted to some behavior because of whatever psychosocial, spiritual deficiency or genetics or epigenetics or whatever it is? We are human. And a big part of my work and the reason for writing the book, and well, not for writing the book, but for publishing it, for sharing it, was that I really felt that I needed to try to help people bust the shame surrounding trauma. You know, in the 100 some odd books I read about trauma and personal development, all of them were, you know, researchers or therapists speaking about accounts of things they heard about from their patients and analyzing those. But I decided to do something different. I went into my, you know, far out of my comfort zone to express my pain and overcome my shame. You know, there was a lot of shame about that, as I talk about in the book. You know, my wife it cost her life because we lived in a co-op on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and she felt that if she asked her mentally ill, chemically addicted adult son to leave, that he was going to be banging on the doors with the doorman, and the police would come, and she would be shamed, and she couldn't take that, and so we kept a lot bottled up, even though she was fortunate to have all the resources that anyone could throw at the problem, as you know, as happened with the Reiners, right?
Yeah.
You know, money does not cure these difficult problems. First and foremost, it takes a lot of faith, ability to seek help, and a willingness to do the work to learn how to overcome many things that people hold inside themselves. And I think that that's what happens in the case of matricide, and with the Reiners, it was patricide as well. That
So where'd you go? Your voice is gone. It just kicked off. There we go. We got you back.
okay. I think that when people have anger inside of them against parents, maybe self-hatred turned outward. I mean, we live in a world where there are tremendous problems. We look at the school shootings. It's a horror. And that is young people with anger that is on the inside turned outward.
Yeah. Society tells us not to talk about the discomfort, right? It tells us not to share the mental illness. It tells us not to share substance abuse, addictions. It tells us to keep it behind closed doors, whatever happens behind closed doors. But then when that door opens and these events happen, murders, then they're like, oh, well, you should have said something. Well, no, society has told us to stay quiet. Now it happens. Now we help. It's a broken system. It's a broken juristic system. It's a broken society. And that's why I love having stories like yours on Tea Time, Burton, is because we need to start bringing the facts to the table. Society is the problem. Society is telling us to stay quiet. And then when these events happen, murders happen, then they're like, oh, but what were the signs? Did you not see any signs? Did you not see any red flags? Well, the red flags are all behind a closed door because you told us to be quiet.
Absolutely. And by the way, PTSD, the most work that was done on that was with the military, and yet they hushed that too and made people feel shame. I wish that politicians on both sides of the aisle would stop defining our success in terms of gross national product or employment figures and face the truth. We are the #2 nation in the world that has deaths from drug overdose. And they say, well, those numbers are going down. But the truth is Narcan has helped save 50,000 lives. So that's why they're trying to put it into, no, the numbers aren't going down. We have deep-rooted problems in our society. And in my book, I address the need for systemic change. These changes are very difficult to achieve. I talk about the importance of trauma-informed care, that our legal system, that our medical system, that our healthcare system, we have so much that we need to fix. What can we do as individuals in the meantime? Because unfortunately, these are very deep-rooted problems, and they're going to take, I don't know when, to figure this out. In the meantime, if we can attend more to our self-care, then at least, we need to be advocates for ourselves, and we need to learn to love ourselves. I'm now, I went from trauma recovery twice a week to doing 5 self-love groups a week. It's so important to love ourselves enough to heal our inner child, to heal that emotional side where abuse might have lived.
Burton, I think the biggest problem is society is telling us we're not successful people. We're not in this category. But look at the Reiners. They were big Hollywood family members known around the world for incredible movies. And they still had dysfunction in their family. Dysfunction is from all walks of life. And that's why we have to make it clear that it doesn't matter who you are. There are people suffering with substance abuse. There are people dealing with mental illness. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be a Hollywood director. You could be a homeless person. There is mental illness in this world. And we need to start bringing that to the table. We need to start opening those things. And what I really love about your book is called The Gift. The gift of being honest. The gift that you lived it. I did my research, Burton, and it took you 11 years to see the photos of your wife. Like, this is things that we need to be opening the doors to, having these conversations, getting real deep and raw, and serving real strong tea, not gossip tea, tea of difference, tea of making life impact choices and decisions, and start calling people out that are saying, "No, what? Keep it behind closed doors until it benefits us." Because that's what they're doing. They're taking advantage of these situations, and then what? Making a joke out of it? It's not a joke. There are people that are actually dying. There are people actually suffering. I live in Canada, and I've never seen homelessness the way I see it now. The drug, they're handing out crack pipes, so you know how to do the crack right. Like, what is wrong with our society?
Yeah, it's very sad, and that's why in the subtitle, I say a trauma survivor's memoir on lost love, murder, suicide, mental illness, drug addiction, family crisis, elder abuse, and how to rise up when life beats you down. And that's, to let people know, to let my patients know, somewhere along the way in my counseling of them, when they may lack faith in their own ability to change, to share with them a little bit of the gift and how much we really are able to change if we persevere and have the hope, get the help, don't turn the people who love us away from us, bring them in. In the drug addiction business, they talk about, and especially you hear this when people come out of being incarcerated, stay away from people, places, and things. And I say to them, no, you have that wrong. It's stay away from unhealthy people, places, and things. You need to connect to healthy people, places, and things. And this, by the way, brings me, if I could just touch on the concept of neuroplasticity, that in initial trauma research and in initial research surrounding substances, 1935 and so forth, when they started AA, they didn't think that these disorders and diseases were fixable. And what we have found in the last 50 years is that the brain, through a process called neuroplasticity, actually has the capability of replacing unhealthy habits and practices, and it rewires itself to healthy ones. It's like it has that capacity because, remember, we are survival of the fittest, right? It's like the brain has that innate capacity to recognize, oh my goodness, that is a way to live longer. That is a way to survive. I'm going to adopt that practice. I was astray when I went down the crack cocaine loop. But wow, this is a way I can heal. I can replace it with walks in nature. I can replace it with physical exercise and meditation and breathing and things that are accessible. I tell my patients, there is nothing that I'm suggesting that requires you to take a trip around the world or spend $100,000 on a surgery. It's all inside of you, waiting to be tapped and brought out.
Well, it goes right to your tea that you gave me, Burton. You gave me teaching trauma recovery process. Recovery is, we can recover from pain and we can turn it into purpose. It is proven. I've had over 500 people sit at this table. Pain to purpose. It does work, guys. It does. And Burton is living proof of that. Marcia is proof of that. So many others who have sat at this table are proof of that. When we take the pain and we heal ourselves, we recover ourselves, we're the ones in control. Heal the inner child and we can move forward. We can get through these hard times. Grief is something that everybody tells us, oh, get over it. It's 6 months, get over it. Oh, it's 2 weeks, get over it. They're gone, move. No, grief is a time process on anyone else's watch clock of their own healing journey and process. It could take you 6 months. It could take you 6 days. It could take you 6 minutes. It depends on the person, and society, once again, sticks their nose in there and says, this is how you guys are going to grieve. Get over it. Get back to work. But that's not how grief works. Grief has its own agenda and it has its own way of working with each of all of us. Yes. Burton, you sharing your story was part of your healing journey. And it is helping people because sharing that story gives other people hope when they read it. And having somebody who has lived the experience, and I've said this many a times on Tea Time, when you live it, speak it. When you don't live it, don't speak it because you're doing more damage. And Burton, you lived it. So you speak it and you share that story because I am proud of you for sharing that story. And I'm sure Barbara is cheering you on and saying, thank you for sharing my story, Burton.
Thank you.
I want to know what the core message sits at the heart of the gift. What is your core message to the viewers and listeners out there?
The core message is that we have an inner power to overcome even the most difficult of circumstances, to learn from it by sitting in awareness, to learning to be mindful, to looking at the world through different eyes as trauma does to you, through the eyes of a child with awe and imagination and love and hope. And it's, I felt when I was writing this, there were many times when it was very dark. And some part of me said, I might as well try. And that would be what I would encourage people to do, even during your hardest, darkest times. Try, live another day, and try to find purpose and opportunity in that day. And by being aware and accepting things that we can't change, and having the courage to change the things we can. And yes, that's paraphrasing the serenity prayer. We can go on to do things that are beyond our wildest imagination.
Burton, where do you find personal justice and peace today after such a loss?
Huh. Personal justice. On a personal level, I feel blessed that I discovered this calling that I had that had gotten away from me from my younger years, where I was brought into a family business and then went into the financial services business, where there's winning and losing of money, which is, as I said, I was left with the experience of connecting to a higher meaning and purpose in my life, and that's the only way to make sense of this in terms of personal justice. There's not a stitch of anything else in my story that makes any sense. The people who know the circumstances, how I lost everything. My wife, my life, my career, my reputation, my stepson to being incarcerated, not incarcerated, but in a mental institution, and my other stepson to suicide. There's no justice in that. I lost a promised inheritance. It goes on and on, but along the way, to say I have a choice. Either I'm going to let this bring me down, or I'm going to survive, and somehow I'm going to pick myself up, and I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to help other people move forward. Every day, and in the book, I say, I come to work, I get paid every 2 weeks. And when the paycheck comes, I'm like, you mean I'm actually getting paid to do this dear work that I'm doing? I'm finding so much joy in the work, and so much joy. We just had a holiday party with group participants where 12 of us got together, and the connection was so beautiful, and people saying how much I've helped them to move forward. People who say, I've been suffering with this disease for 10 years or 20 years, and I've never come across someone with the compassion, caring that you are able to demonstrate to me, and how you've shown me a way to rise up. That's the justice, for me, to feel that I've reached people in that deeper way. It makes it worthwhile for me.
I like that statement, rise up. Burton, you have a podcast that you're starting, or you already have it started?
Well, I was thinking about doing something on courageous conversations, but I haven't done that yet. Some of my ideas for 2026 include an abridged version of The Gift and a workbook on trauma healing, and I've just launched on my website, traumatotriumph.club. I show a series of wearable T-shirts, which goes back to my friend who said everything happens for a reason. And we have a series of designs like the butterfly that goes through a metamorphosis where it actually kills itself for a moment in order to birth a new butterfly. And different symbols, the unilome symbol of life's twists and turns on the road to enlightenment, and on the shirt, victim to victor, or I survived. We're encouraging people to get out there and claim their humanness and not be ashamed. And that's something. I just felt that T-shirts was something that, you know, anyone can relate to that and wear that message. So I wanted to make that available, because 350 pages on trauma, even my colleagues have said, wow, that was a tough read. It takes some of them, it takes some of them a long time. Some of them because they know that it's going to open a door to a lot of what they've been keeping bottled up inside. But these things, you know, if we can feel these feelings, we can move through them. It's a double-edged sword, I say. We need to feel in order to heal.
Well, I loved the merchandise that you have on your website, because you have the tree of life and it says, I survived. The butterfly is the gift to trauma to triumph. Pathway to enlightenment, the unalone obstacle of the twists and turns in life. The lotus flower, I'm transforming. The phoenix, I survived. And the Ouroboros?
Yeah.
Victim to victory. I don't know what the Ouroboros, what is that?
It's kind of a symbolic snake that eats itself. Yeah.
Oh, like the serpent.
Yeah.
Okay. See,
And
when
the
I don't know
cycle.
stuff, I ask.
That was the one I was really familiar with too. Yeah.
I love it because of the images that are on the t-shirts. They're not overpowering. They're very in your face, but strong and powerful, and the colors of them. So I strongly suggest everybody check out his website, because these are beautiful stories. And like you said, some people that read 350 pages on trauma, it's overwhelming. But you can still share your story in different ways, like through the merchandise, through workshops, through exercises and stuff like that. I've seen something here about Tai Chi and spiritual teaching. Did you do some Tai Chi?
I did. I was at Esalen on the West Coast. It's a personal development center. And they had a Tai Chi master, and we would get up at 7 a.m. in the morning, and we would do, I don't know, a half hour, an hour of Tai Chi overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And it's a great practice, because it's a centering and grounding practice. And, you know, in this world of clamor, I mean, we're bombarded, right?
Yep.
With sound. And sometimes when we're simply quiet, we learn undiscovered things about ourselves.
Absolutely. There was something I found that I wanted to ask you about, and that's the avoidance behavior. I don't hear too much about avoidance behavior. Do you want to share a little bit about that, Burton?
Well, with respect to what? In other words, we avoid what's uncomfortable.
So, Burton, is that something that you write in the book?
I think it's in there.
I put him on the spot.
I'm sure it's one of those 60,000 words. I'm looking at the book. It's 274 pages plus a lengthy introduction, which is why it comes to maybe the 350. But by the way, you mentioned when I finished the book, there was not the very last chapter at the end. After the timeline, which, by the way, has a lot of blanks in it. And I realized, we lose memory when we're traumatized, and that's why there are so many. But after that addendum, I didn't even have a chapter title. It says Crime Scene Photos and Other Heartbreaking Images. And I decided that my readers who stuck with me to the end had a right to see some of the difficult images. And as you said, it took me 11 years to work up the courage to ask for them, only to be rejected on the basis that they said that these will be disturbing to the family. I don't know what family matters who still exists, but I felt my readers were entitled, and I got some of the photos, but they said we will not give you any photos with blood. So you can imagine how many photos were not given. And I went to my artist who designed the rest of the book, and I said, here's a photo of my wife lying peacefully in bed. And I've had night terrors of what it must have been in her final moments to look up at this son who she unconditionally loved, doing what he was doing to her. And I said, I want you to modify the photo to have an artistic representation of night terrors. And he said, I won't do that. That's against my religion. And I said, well, you're really traumatizing me here all over again, because I'm living this and having these nightmares, and you're telling me you're not going to do this. And so he said, well, why don't you have someone else do it? And I said, well, I contracted with you, so either you do it or get someone else to do it. And 15 minutes later, it came to me with a request that his name be removed from my acknowledgement. So I said, okay, I'm okay with that. I felt that my readers needed to have a sense, pictures worth 1,000 words. I felt that people needed to understand the deep level of pain to then understand the level of growth and opportunity that's on the other side of that pain.
I think people need to see the truth, and the truth hurts. If we're going to cover it up with lies, are we actually healing ourselves? We're not. We're avoiding the situation. We're avoiding healing. We're avoiding going through the grief and the process of it. And there's different ways of grief, and there's different ways of processing grief. And I really hope in the new future, in the new year, that everyone looks at grief a little different than it being a shameful thing. Grief is beautiful because it's teaching us how to live without our loved ones. It's teaching us to live without a loss of a job, a loss of a pet, a loss of a home. There's so much different kinds of griefs out there, not just loved ones. And grief needs to be spoken in a way that there's no shame attached to it anymore.
Yeah. And after all, it's a reminder of how much love there was. Because if there wasn't so much grief, there wouldn't have been so much love, right? So it's a tribute to those that we've lost, to remember them and their core values, and keep them in our hearts, as we're able to do. Talk to them when we want, write to them when we want.
Well, in your book on page 236, chapter 42, you have the giving and the receiving. Let's talk about the giving and receiving on page 236, chapter 42. See, I do my homework.
That's great. The giving and the receiving. Yes. So when I, in the midst of this process, I came across gratitude as a practice. And I went to a forgiveness workshop, and I found myself saying, how am I going to forgive the unforgivable? I mean, how is that possible? And at this moment, how am I going to feel grateful? They say, think about 3 reasons while you're brushing your teeth that you have to be grateful. But that wasn't going to do it for me. So I said, I'm going to create a book I called it my gratitude book. It was a self-published one single edition, and I challenged myself. The software enabled me to do 100 pages, so I did 50 pages of photos with the companion words, and I challenged myself to find 50 reasons throughout my lifetime that I was grateful. And I included mentors and, people I learned from along the way, experiences. And it was an amazing thing, because Brother David Steindl-Rast said that we're not grateful because we're joyous, but we're joyous because we're grateful. And so the giving and the receiving came in where I wrote to all these people who are on these pages, and the completion of the process of feeling gratitude was to thank them and for them to respond to. So and there are so many people who are great at the giving. In fact, it's part of a trauma response that to make up for some of our inadequacies or feelings of not being enough, that we have what's called the fawn response, the people pleasing, and we're just doing and doing and doing for others. We're not remembering to receive for ourselves, and that's an important piece. So that was where the giving and the receiving comes in. Thank you for doing all that homework. I'm glad it engaged you.
And this is what I like to do. I like to do deep research on my guests, because I like to know you guys on a personal level. I don't want to just come on here and do a Q&A kind of podcast. I want to really know you guys. I want to understand your stories so I can put myself in your shoes for that moment during that 1 hour.
That's beautiful, and I can't thank you enough. It's a beautiful thing when two human beings, and of course your audience, can connect on such a deep level. People have said to me, "Why were you so brutally honest in the book?" And I said, not being honest wouldn't have made any sense. Why bother telling a story if it couldn't be an honest story, even parts of it were sad and parts of it were uplifting and joyful, and that's life, right? But thank you for wanting to share that and for wanting to take the time to get to know me a bit through my writing. I truly appreciate that.
Well, Burton, what final message would you have for all the listeners out there tonight who are going through what the Reiners are going through, what you went through? What message would you have for all of them out there?
I would try to encourage them to tap into the miracle of life, regardless of what they're going through, and to be patient and aware and hopeful, and seek help and support. And with that, everything is possible. The answers lie within.
And where can people find this book and reach out to you to have you as a guest in that? If you could just spell out your website to the audio listeners.
Yeah, so the gift Trauma to Triumph is available on Amazon.com, and you can contact me at traumatotriumph.club for the t-shirts, for the reviews of the book, for other information, for the workshops I'm doing on self-love and trauma recovery. It's all there.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to do a closing up for tonight's tea time, and we will be back next week with the final 4 for season 6, and then we'll start all over again next year with a season 7. What a deeply moving and courageous conversation, Burton. Thank you for trusting this table with your story and for showing us that healing does not erase loss. It allows us to carry it with grace, strength, and purpose. Tonight, we are reminded that trauma can break us open, not just apart. The vulnerability is not weakness, but a gateway to connection. Your journey affirms that even when life devastates us, it can still offer profound gifts if we are willing to do the work of healing. To everyone listening, may you leave this tea time knowing you are not alone in your grief, your questions, or your becomings. There is no timeline for healing, only permission to keep going. Until we gather again, keep choosing compassion, keep honoring your story, and keep trusting that light can still meet you, even here. And thank you guys all for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Same time, same place, and we'll do this all over again.
Namaste.